Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this amazing, fantastic Wednesday afternoon. And the reason why I say it's fantastic and the reason why I'm saying like all of this is because we actually have some big news to talk about. Yes, this is coming off as like crazy. I did not expect this, but Woj retired. Like, what? Woj retired from being a, what's it called? A reporter for ESPN. He's the lead reporter for ESPN, and he just recently retired. So that is easily going to be the first segment, and he's taking a new job. And we're just going to talk a little bit about that and exactly what that means and what everybody should do, this, that, and the other. Then in the second segment, I have news to talk about the WNBA. They're going to expand once again. They're going to expand all the way back to Portland. So I'm just going to talk about that in the second segment. And then in the third segment, CBS recently just released a list of their top 10 players in the NBA right now. So I'm going to look over that list and just give off my opinions. And then in the fourth segment, we are going to continue talking about players on each and every single team that have the absolute most to prove. And we also have, now I'm going to continue that into the fifth segment, the same way that I did in the previous segments. I'm going to make it two segments as opposed to just one because it's a lot of players that I still have to go over and a lot of teams that I still have to go over. But before I begin and get into this huge, like just unbelievable news, I do have to say that we really like what you guys have to say during the show. We love hearing from you guys, whether you guys have a hot take, a comment for the game, or something you've been dying to share. We are all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then you can go ahead and use Super Chat. You can just click the $sign below the chat box and send in your comments or donations that way. It really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, that's not a big deal. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and then you can go ahead and send in your comments or donations that way. And either or really helps the show. But let's go right ahead and just drop the ball. Woj, one of the biggest lead reporter in ESPN, he's retired. Literally anybody that follows NBA basketball knows exactly who this is. He breaks so much important news to so many other outlets. I mean, he broke the news, I believe, about Kevin Durant signing with Golden State. He also broke the news of the NBA shutting down the season in 2020 due to COVID-19. He broke so many important news segments and contract negotiations and trades. During the trade deadline, he was working like an absolute madman, just tweeting everything. You guys can go ahead and check out the video that I uploaded during the trade deadline, where it was like you could see that I just keep refreshing my phone, waiting for Woj to announce something, a new trade, a new free agent signing, something like that, because that's essentially what he does. And the last ever quote Woj bomb, because that's what we call it, that's what the fans call it. It's a big tweet that Woj just decides to drop regarding NBA free agents and NBA news, was from Isaac Okoro, saying that Isaac Okoro has agreed to a 3-year, $38 million deal to stay with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Michael Tellem, Jeff Schwartz, and Marcus Monk of XL Basketball tell ESPN. And that was the final tweet that regarded important NBA news regarding an NBA player and its free agent signing. So, I mean, this is incredible. Like, the fact that Woj isn't going to be responsible for tweeting all of these news segments out, it's a tragic day for a lot of NBA fans, because it's like, you know, that's sort of it's an iconic thing. It's like, it's something that everybody that's a fan of the NBA, like a legitimate fan of the NBA, does, especially during the trade deadline. And a lot of people are probably going to have mixed opinions on him retiring and him leaving, but instead of reporting, he is now pursuing a career as a basketball GM. Yes, he is going to be the GM of St. Bonaventure's men's basketball team. I believe this was his former team. This was his former school, and he is a vivid don't. He is a yes, he is. He's a 1991 graduate of the school, and he's also like responsible for sending in donations to that school as well. Obviously, alumni, they always donate. And it's a thrill of, this is a quote from Woj, "It is a thrill of a lifetime to be able to return to a university and community that I love in a role of service to our student athletes, coaches, and institution. I am hopeful that I can bring value in a lot of areas to our basketball program and open doors for our young men's futures in ways both professionally and personally." And obviously, Woj, he's worked with ESPN since 2007. Since 2017, previously worked at Yahoo Sports and the Record of Bergen County, New Jersey, among other stops. And he says, quote, "I'm retiring from a dream job at ESPN, and I'm so incredibly grateful for my time and experience with the worldwide leader." He recently tweeted announced his retirement and, that he was taking another step forward into his career. A GM role has been more common in college basketball in recent years as well, given the new NIL deals, and as the transfer portal has also made a wholesale roster turnover an inherent part of the sport. So the role is obviously going to include name, image, and likeness allocations, so NIL deals, recruiting, and supporting successful Bonnie's coach, Mark Schmidt. So that's it. That's what Woj is essentially going to transform into. He's done from being a reporter, and he's going to be a GM, which is honestly, I'm not entirely sure how he's going to be able to handle that situation, but given the amount of connections that he has, he's most likely going to be able to secure an abundance of NIL deals for his collegiate team and this, that, and the other. So we'll see exactly how it'll unfold. And according to a quote, however, they're saying Woj is a perfect person to fill this role, combining his intimate knowledge of Saint Bonaventure and our Franciscan values with a deep network of relationships he has built across the worlds of professional and intercollegiate basketball. And this was a quote from the Saint Bonaventure athletic director, Bob Beretta, and he said, he goes along with, quote, "The fact that the preeminent journalist in his field is willing to walk away from a lucrative media career to serve his alma mater in a support role is a testament to his love and passion for Bonas." So this is like, I'm not entirely sure if this job is just offering him more money than ESPN's job. I'm not entirely sure any sort of deals or anything like that. Nothing has been talked about. Woj hasn't tweeted anything about that. But this does seem like something that he really wants to do. Again, he does donate to his school a lot, and if you're donating to your school, it does mean that you greatly support a lot of the programs that the school has to offer. And in a statement posted on social media by Woj, "I grew up the son of a factory worker 2 miles from ESPN's campus and only ever dreamed of making a living as a sports writer. 37 years ago, the Hartford Courant gave me my first byline, and I never stopped chasing the thrill of it all. The craft transformed my life, but I've decided to retire from ESPN and the news industry. I understand the commitment required in my role, and it's an investment that I'm no longer driven to make. Time isn't in endless supply, and I want to spend mine in ways that are more personally meaningful. I leave with overwhelming gratitude for countless mentors and colleagues, subjects and stories, readers and viewers. No one has benefited more from me than the belief, trust, and generosity of others. The past 7 years at ESPN have been a particular privilege. I am appreciative of the company's leadership, especially ESPN Chairman Jimmy Pitaro and Executive Director Christina Douglas, for the understanding and acceptance of my decision to make a life change. After all these years of reporting on everyone's teams, I'm headed back to my own." And that was the end of it. Pitaro said in a statement, "I've known and admired Woj since we first worked together at Yahoo in 2007. His work ethic is second to none. He's extraordinarily talented and fearless. He has led the industry at ESPN, and his dedication to the craft and to fans is legendary. While we will miss his daily output, we completely understand his decision to make a lifestyle change and slow down a bit. We know we will continue to thrive in this next chapter, and he has our collective gratitude and support. And there it goes. Woj is done. Period. So everybody start following Shams now, because he's probably going to be the lead insider, and he's probably going to, well, not the lead insider of ESPN, but he's going to be the biggest insider that's going to break a lot of NBA news. He already has been doing that, but Woj is just a little bit more iconic. So everybody's going to have to shift over to Shams and follow him on X, formerly known as Twitter, if you guys really want some big breaking news stories coming in from basketball. But aside from that, we are going to pivot over to the next segment, where we talk about the WNBA expanding all the way back to Portland. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned for that in the next segment.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about the WNBA expanding over back to Portland. And that's essentially what the entire second segment is going to be. Before I begin with this, I do, however, want to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say for the show. Whether you guys have a hot take for the game, burning question, something you've been dying to say, we are all ears. And if you really want your conversation or your comment to get noticed, then why don't you go ahead and just use Super Chat. You can click the $ below the chat box, send in your donations and comments. That way your comments will guaranteed be featured on the show next time if you do so. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, that's fine. You can always go ahead and use the link displayed below the ticker and send in your comment or donations that way. GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Again, either or helps. So with that out of the way, let's continue on with this new news about the WNBA expanding. So let's see where to start. The WNBA playoffs, they're starting. They're right around the corner. I believe it's going to start this weekend for any of you guys interested. And now, I'm not sure exactly how I feel about the WNBA playoffs starting over the weekend. I feel like it would have been better if the WNBA playoffs actually, happen and the games happen during the week. Like, for example, on Tuesdays and on Wednesdays and rather early on Friday before college football starts, and maybe even on Thursday before the NFL starts. Because I have a feeling that over the weekend, the NFL is going to eat up a lot of that viewership for the WNBA playoffs. And that's going to be a big problem for the WNBA because they're on very good track to making a profit for this year. First time that's probably ever going to happen. But they really, the best part of their game, the postseason, the best part of any sports season is the postseason. And if you are having those games in the middle of the NFL, then you can't compete against that market in the United States. This was a problem when the NBA, did the bubble. Like during the finals, the NBA finals, people were watching the return of the NFL more than they were watching the NBA finals. It was the least viewed finals in the history of the NBA for a reason, because the NFL was going on at exactly the same time. The NBA was pulling 6 million viewers. Meanwhile, the NFL, the opening night game of NFL, was pulling in 22 million viewers. You cannot compete with the NFL. So I personally think that the playoffs, they should happen during the week when NFL games and college football games aren't going on. That is just me, however. But aside from that, the WNBA is going to consider expanding back to Portland. Now, I say back because the WNBA used to have a team in Portland before, all the way back in 2000. However, it ended up folding after the 2022 season, so it only lasted 2 years. Go figure. I mean, try expanding the WNBA in general at the time in 2000, when barely anybody was watching WNBA basketball. It's really a difficult task. Not to mention the fact that Portland as a whole, and, the Portland fans, there aren't really that many. Like, I'm sorry to say, but Portland rarely gets any sort of media attention coming in from, not only, the Blazers from the NBA, but, in any sport in general. The Portland Trailblazers barely get talked about. They never got talked about last season, especially since Damian Lillard has left, the Portland Trailblazers haven't had any kind of traction in terms of viewership and, actual media attention. And I mean, if Portland, the NBA team, if the Trailblazers aren't getting much media attention, imagine how much media attention the WNBA was going to get, especially at that time. Pre-Caitlin Clark, the WNBA was nowhere near, and it never made a profit, never was competing for any kind of money, it was never popular. But now that it's becoming popular, now they can actually legitimately have an expanded franchise all the way over in Portland. Now, this is going to be the 15th franchise for the WNBA, and it is going to begin play in the 2026 WNBA season, So the new team is going to be owned and operated by RAJ Sports, led by controlling owner Lisa Bethal-Mirage and her brother Alex Bethal. And they also are the majority owners of the NWSL's Portland Thorns. So that's where the ownership is going to go to in this WNBA franchise. This is the first time the WNBA is going to return to a city that it previously left, although Engelbert expressed an openness to do so again in the future. So this is a quote coming in from Engelbert and what she told ESPN. "I don't think we ever have a bias as to whether there was a team there before or not. But certainly I think Portland has proven they'll show up for women's sports and definitely for women's basketball, so we're excited to be coming back to the market." Engelbert's letter in November was addressed to Oregon Senator Ron Wyden, a champion of women's sports who had been working closely with the bid and hosted the commissioners at the nation's first sports bar dedicated solely to women's sports, the Sports Bra, during a site visit to Portland last year. And the article continues going on with some quotes coming in from the Golden State Valkyries as, quote, 72 hours of really bitter disappointment, at least this is what it's saying. Quote, "After 72 hours, we said, back on our feet, we're going to get this done," Wyden told ESPN. Another quote, "It really was a constant building and a process from then. I am particularly appreciative of Kathy because she's got me calling her saying, what's next? What should we do? What's the path? We don't want to give up." And really, I think, one of the big problems with expansion teams is just being able to acquire women to actually play for the team. And that's going to be a big question that's going to be brought up. Exactly where are they going to be placed in the draft? And they're set to make the franchise, in 2026. That's when they're going to be playing. And personally, I think this is going to be the biggest hunch ever, but Juju from USC, that female collegiate player that's just absolutely phenomenal that people are saying could be better than Caitlin, I think she's going to get drafted to Portland. I can totally see her as the new face of the Portland franchise and bringing the attention over to Portland and getting the franchise off on the right foot. Like, if there's anybody that should be on that Portland team, it should be Juju in the future. And it is lined up perfectly because the franchise is going to be coming in 2026. So in 2 years from now, Juju still has way more years under her collegiate belt. And she was only a freshman last season, so she's going to be a sophomore this coming season. Then she'll be a junior, and by the time she's a junior, she'll either be in her senior year, playing in her senior year, or she'll get drafted by Portland. I'm praying and I'm hoping that Juju gets drafted to Portland because that would be amazing for the franchise that's literally just on the come up. Everybody's going to want to watch Juju. Like, she could be the next face. Like, she could be the next great Caitlin Clark. She could be it. And I have huge faith in Juju. So I really, really hope that if there's anybody that's going to be on that team, it is her, and that Portland immediately drafts her and immediately picks her up before some other team does. And like, I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you would rather see somebody else from women's college basketball join Portland and their new franchise, because I think she will be phenomenal. Like, it would be her squad. She will be the face of the team. She already has one of the best handles that I've seen coming in from a female athlete in college, like right next to Caitlin Clark. Again, like, their handle of the ball, what they are able to do with the ball is amazing. Like, they've really come a long way with the WNBA, and I really, really pray and I hope that Juju ends up being the face of Portland. That would be so awesome. Like, it would literally be like the female version of Damian Lillard. It could be the female version of Damian Lillard over there in Portland, and that would be a sight to see. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. But we're out of time for the second segment, so now we're going to shift our focus back over to the NBA because CBS just recently released a list of their top 10 players in the NBA right now, and I'm going to list off all of those players. I'll give my opinions on whether or not I feel like they should be moved, whether or not they deserve to be on here, all of that good stuff in the third segment, so stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. I will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be looking at CBS Sports' list of all the top 10 NBA players in the NBA right now, like currently. And, you know, CBS, they just recently released this list. I believe they did this, I want to say maybe around yesterday, maybe like a little bit later. Yesterday at around 4:20, ironic, I know, it was, they made this list. So I'm just going to go ahead and list off all of the players in order. You guys are going to see the players on your screen right now. Number one, easily, is going to be him. Like, there's no argument for that. I completely agree with Jokic being number one. There's no reason why he shouldn't be number one. He recently just won the MVP, one of the best offensive players that the NBA has seen, arguably the best player in the year of 2020 moving forward. Like, he is probably, like, if there's anyone that's the face of the NBA right now, it's Jokic. He's the best player in the NBA, the best offensive talent. He almost averages a triple-double practically every single year. He's incredibly efficient at scoring, easily the reason why Denver is such a powerhouse of a team and such a dominant team as it is. No questions about him being number one. If you have a problem with him being number one, then you're just wrong. You're wrong. Plain and simple. And next player on CBS's list is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Again, an easy pick. Easily the second best player in the NBA. And I literally said this yesterday on the podcast. You guys can go ahead and check it out. I had Jokic here and Giannis directly below him. It's marginal. It's very, very close who the best player is. But Giannis he's up there, like very, very close to being the best player. And the thing that separates Giannis from Jokic on the offensive side of the ball is Jokic is a far better passer. And even then, that's giving a lot of credit to Jokic because Giannis is a very good passer in his own right. Like he's grown into that facilitator and that point forward kind of role. And he's also a fantastic playmaker. He's just not as good of a playmaker as Jokic. But that being said, averaging almost 7 assists as a power forward, and his assists have only increased as the years continued most of the time. It's roughly between 6 and 5. Like those are some very good stats for someone that isn't really seen as that much of a playmaker. And on top of that, you could argue that Giannis is just as consistent as Jokic, the only difference being his three-point percentage not being as consistent. But Giannis was the first player in NBA history to average 30 points while shooting 61% from the field while accumulating 11 rebounds along with 6+ assists as well. And that's an accomplishment in of itself that rarely gets talked about. And the big separator and the reason why I think Giannis has the potential of being better than Jokic is because of Giannis's defense. Like, while Jokic has the positive on the offense, and even then, it's a very small positive because the only thing that Jokic is legitimately even better at than Giannis is three-point shooting and passing the ball. And even then, Giannis has proven he doesn't need three-point shooting to be effective because he's been averaging more points than Nikola Jokic despite not taking as many three-pointers. And he's more efficient from inside the arc than Jokic is, even though Jokic is incredibly efficient in there as well. But defense, Giannis completely clears Jokic on that end in every single category. Giannis can rotate. Giannis can guard the 1 through the 5. He can guard the 5 exceptionally well. He has a Defensive Player of the Year award to prove that. And he's just an overall better, more competent defender than Jokic is. And that's really the separator between the two, aside from all the MVPs that Jokic has, which is why I think it's very marginal, Giannis's case of being better than Jokic. It's really, really, really close. But Jokic is better than Giannis by the tiniest thread. It is very close. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. I spent a lot of time on that because it's I really want Giannis to be the best player in the NBA. I'm a big fan of Giannis, but I do have so much respect for Jokic. It's very, very close. Next player that they have on this list is Luka Doncic, and I'm a little bit skeptical of Luka Doncic, being this high. He always ranks really high in these picks for a lot of these lists. He always ranks number 1 for being the favorite in MVPs until Jokic comes in and completely steals it. I'm not sure if I have a problem with him at being number 3, though. I think being at number 3 is rather solid, especially given his finals appearance in the NBA recently and how he performed in the finals as well. I think he's somewhat earned that spot given everything that's happened and how the season unfolded for him. He did have a little bit of help from Kyrie Irving, however, but that's besides the point because Kyrie didn't really play well in the finals. Meanwhile, Luka Doncic played outstanding in the finals. Well, not really outstanding, but he played great in the finals. That's the right word for it. So, not a really big problem with that. I do think that Luka Doncic is better than SGA, despite SGA being ranked a little bit higher in terms of MVP ballots and MVP votes, because he was second in the running when Luka was third. So I don't really have a problem with him being here, especially given the fact that the Thunder ended up losing to Luka Doncic in the postseason. Now, it wasn't SGA's fault. It was more so the team's fault, which is why SGA is ranked at number 4th, according to to CBS. And I don't really have a problem with SGA being ranked 4th. Again, he's a fantastic point guard, arguably a top 3 point guard in the NBA right now. And really, the only other players that legitimately have arguments are Luka Doncic being better than him and Steph Curry, who's going to come a little bit later in this list. Spoiler alert. But he's not next on this list. For some reason, Joel Embiid is next on this list, which I completely disagree. Joel Embiid didn't play all that much last season. He barely played as many games as he should have played. He did play in the postseason, however, but then again, the postseason was full of disappointment, as it usually is. And I just can't have Joel Embiid, someone who only played 39 games last season, be so high and be in the top 5. I don't agree with this being in the top 5 at all. I don't care whether he's a fantastic player. He could be a top 2 player when he's healthy. Sure, he wasn't healthy last season. He shouldn't be on this top 5 list. Should not be anywhere near it. He should be below Steph. He should be below LeBron. He should be below Jason Tatum. All of those players he should be below, simply because of the not being available for the team. That is a part of being a good player. I'm sorry, you have to be available for your team. Your best ability is your availability, and I will scream it to the mountaintops with this. I do not agree with Joel Embiid being ranked this high. He should be ranked 8th at the very, very most. He should be ranked 8th. And just given off of last season, if he would have played 60 plus games last season, maybe even if he would have played 70 plus games, I'd have no problem with this. But the fact that he's played only 30 and he gets on this list, no, he shouldn't be in the top 5. Next player on this list is Steph Curry. And personally, I think Steph Curry should be right below SGA on this list, simply because Steph Curry, he didn't have a lot of help from last season. And a lot of that had to do with Klay Thompson not really playing as well as he normally plays, and Steph Curry not being used to the help that he usually gets. I wouldn't have a problem in putting him over Joel Embiid on this list, and I really think that he should be in the top 5, somewhere in the top 5, not just because of how he played in the NBA, but also what he's shown us in the Olympics, stepping up in the moments when Team USA desperately needed him to. When Team USA needed to get a bucket and when Team USA needed a basket, they gave it to 2 people, and Steph Curry was one of them. And he needs to be upheld with that respect. And I know that it's not NBA basketball. Doesn't matter to me. It is still basketball. And what I saw in those Olympics from Steph is enough to put him in the top 5, or at least over Joel Embiid on this list. Because the next player that that CBS put on this list is Jason Tatum. Now, I have no problem with Jason Tatum being in the top 10 whatsoever. None. He won the NBA Finals. He was arguably the first or the second best option for the team. And, during the postseason, you could argue that he was only the second best because he didn't really win that many awards. He didn't win the Eastern Conference Finals MVP or the Finals MVP. He still won the championship, though, and he still was a very important contributor to their team, regardless of how you feel about Jason Tatum and the regular season as a whole. Now, he does get a little bit of a knock at the fact that he was benched a couple of times. That you could argue that was a Steve Kerr problem than a Jason Tatum problem, and you could argue that maybe he wasn't even the best player on the team, but still he did win the championship for the Golden State. I'm so used to Golden State winning championships. I apologize. The Boston Celtics winning the championship, and I think that in and of itself demands respect, but maybe not 7th. I'm not entirely sure where I would put each of these players yet, but I do think that Jason Tatum does deserve to be over Joel Embiid, not just because of the fact that Jason Tatum won the championship recently, but every single year in the postseason, Jason Tatum and his team always, and I mean always, beats the 76ers, and they always beat Joel Embiid. And you could make the argument that it's because Jason Tatum has a much better team than the 76ers, but still, Jason Tatum's play has a lot of part into that, along with Joel Embiid's play in the postseason that plays a role into that. So, again, arguments can be made. This next player, however, definitely should be higher on this list, and that is LeBron James. It doesn't matter what any of you guys think about LeBron. He is a top 5 player, which is why I think he should be in the same conversation with Steph Curry being over Joel Embiid, especially given what happened these Olympics. The best players in the entire NBA on Team USA, some of the best players ever assembled in the NBA, one of the best teams ever assembled in the NBA, the Avengers, they called themselves. They gave the ball to one man to close the game every single time, and that man was a almost 40-year-old LeBron James, and he deserves all that respect. Look, the postseason, sure, you can make an argument that he didn't really play as good as you expect a LeBron to play. But you could also make the argument that Jamal Murray and Jokic just hit the most ridiculous shots against the Lakers. You can see it in the shooting percentages. The Nuggets shoot far better against the Lakers than they do against any other team. And again, you can make the argument that he shouldn't be that high because he lost in the first round. However, I do think that the Olympics should be taken into account, especially the importance of performance in the games that he's played. Like, he's hit game winner and hit clutch shot after clutch shot. He's still proven that on a team full of the best players, he reigns supreme. That is, he has proven that through the Olympics. So because of that, I think that CBS should have changed the rankings to LeBron at 5, Steph Curry at 6, Jason Tatum at 7, and then Joel Embiid should have been right here. Joel Embiid should have taken this spot. I know that's going to ruffle a lot of your feathers, but guess what? That's my opinion. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Next player on this list is the one and only Slim Reaper, Kevin Durant. And, Kevin Durant, he is a top 10 player. He definitely deserves to be on this list. He's right. He's a little bit lower because of the fact that he got swept recently in the postseason to Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I totally understand why he needs to get a dock on his ranking for that. Not to mention, I feel like he somewhat lost a step in the postseason. I don't know what it is, but it's like his postseason success is very, very bad ever since he left Golden State. And I think putting him at 9 and in the lower part of the top 10 is all right, given what he's able to do for a team and given what he does and what he has done given his career. He did play very well in the Olympics, and he was a very key piece in terms of scoring and hitting important shots and hitting daggers as well, yes. But, again, getting swept in the first round, it's never a good look. And then you can make the argument, Steph Curry didn't even make the playoffs. But then again, Klay Thompson went 0 for 10 in that elimination game. I don't really expect anyone to make the playoffs if you're going 0 for 10 as the second option. You're just hurting your team. And as much as I really like to defend Klay Thompson, I'm not going to be delusional and say he didn't have his faults during some parts of the season. It's that simple. And then the next player on this list is Anthony Edwards. Now, I really don't understand why Anthony Edwards is already in a top 10 list, given the fact that he didn't really play well in the final round of the postseason, not to mention that he didn't really play well in the elimination game against Denver. He got a lot of hype for sweeping the Phoenix Suns and making it farther into the postseason than anybody ever expected, but it's not like he really played well, So if there was anyone else that I don't even think Anthony Edwards should be on this list entirely. If there was anyone that should be in the 10th spot, I'd give it to someone like maybe, Anthony flies in my way. I'd give it to someone like maybe Anthony Davis, who played very, very well for the Olympics. Yes, Anthony Edwards did play well for the Olympics as well, but you could argue that Anthony Davis's numbers were sort of boosted with the rebounds and the blocking. His blocking was phenomenal, not to mention his scoring. He was able to fill in the role that he needed to and actually outplay Joel Embiid in several games with Team USA. And again, there's a lot of arguments to be made. Anthony Davis, I actually don't have a problem if you don't want Anthony Davis in the top 10, just not Anthony Edwards. You could Jaylen Brown. What about Jaylen Brown in the top 10? He just won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP and the Finals MVP. Give it to him. Not to mention the championship that he won. Finals MVP, Eastern Conference Finals MVP. You had to have been the best player in those two crucial series in order to even get the the award. So I'd have no problem with Jaylen Brown being in the top 10. I definitely think he's earned it. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. And there's several, like, you know, other players that could be a part of this list as well. You can even, like, Kawhi should be, you could argue Kawhi should be on this list, even though he was injured in the postseason. And everybody knows, like, you know, postseason, Kawhi is a demon. You could argue that Kawhi should be in the top 10. You could also argue maybe somebody like Paul George could be in the top 10. Maybe even Sabonis, who is a very, very underrated power forward in the NBA, might I add. Like, anybody that isn't Anthony Edwards, I don't agree with Anthony Edwards being in the top 10 whatsoever. And I wouldn't mind pushing like a Jaylen Brown in the top 10, literally because of the awards that he won in the postseason, proving to everybody that not only does he deserve the contract that he was given, but that he can perform. Anthony Edwards did not perform. Jaylen Brown did. And that's really the big difference. Not to mention, I feel like Jaylen Brown is a much more competent defender than Anthony Edwards, while also still having a similar skill set and moves, not really a move set, but a similar skill set to Anthony Edwards as well. Not to mention, he hit one of the most important shots in the entire series against the Pacers, and they ended up winning in overtime. Like, that's clutch right there. And he should get recognized for it. Like, he's obviously, like, and it's unfortunate because I feel like Jaylen Brown is going to be remembered as one of the worst finals MVPs in recent history, which just is unfortunate in of itself, because it's like, in my opinion, the worst finals MVP in the history of basketball is Andre Iguodala. Like, it's that simple. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. But Jaylen Brown is far from the worst finals MVP, and he definitely deserves some respect going into this season, especially given how he played. Again, you can argue that the team was stacked and it was very good, so of course he was going to play that well. But he won the hardware to prove it. Like, he has hardware under his resume now. He should be in the top 10 given that he did it recently. Am I turning into a Celtics fan? No, I'm not. But put some respect on these players. Let me know in the comments exactly what you guys think. If you guys think that Jaylen Brown should be on this list. Maybe you guys think he shouldn't be on this list and I'm being utterly insane. So but again, we'll figure out exactly what you guys have to say about that in the comments. But with that out of the way, we're actually going to go into a break and go into the fourth segment where I talk about NBA players that have the most to prove going into this season. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back, excuse me, with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be going over players that have the most to prove on every single NBA team. The last time we did this, we left off at the Minnesota Timberwolves with Jaden McDaniels. So if you guys are curious on what I have to say about that, you can go ahead and listen to the podcast that I did yesterday. And for those of you guys who are on the video side, you can go ahead and click on the video in the GSMC Basketball playlist to listen to what I had to say about that. And I believe it's titled Players with the Most to Prove. I have 4 parts of that, so this is going to be like part 5, and then the other segment is going to be part 6. And so we have about 11 more teams to go over, I believe. And the next team that we are going to be talking about is the Pelicans. And the player with the most to prove on the Pelicans is the one and only Brandon Ingram. So there's a lot of trade talk going around with Brandon Ingram. A lot of people are expecting Brandon Ingram to be traded or be involved in a New Orleans trade package somewhere in the near future, given the amount of players that they have. They just recently acquired DeJounte Murray. They also have CJ McCollum, not to mention Zion Williamson. And they lack a starting center that can defend the rim. And given the fact that they already have DeJounte Murray and CJ, who are already fantastic scorers, having somebody like Brandon Ingram as a scorer, not to mention Zion, who could be a 30-point per game scorer, doesn't really seem that ideal or as necessary as acquiring a rim protector, meaning that, and this is one of the big reasons why a lot of people expect Brandon Ingram to get traded. So it appears that the Pelicans are going to be moving forward with extension-eligible swingman Brandon Ingram. So if he had more of a trade market, that would probably not be the case. And that's really the big problem, that he doesn't have that big of a trade market. And he used to be a former All-Star and a Most Improved Player of the Year award winner. And he is a very good player, yes, but he's not a great one. So really, he has played 65-plus games as a rookie, and he's really difficult in terms of player to he's a really difficult player to decide how much he's worth in terms of contract negotiations. So this is probably why New Orleans has thought twice about trying to trade him, or thought twice about even trying to sign him to a new contract. And there might be a contract amount at which it makes sense for Ingram and the Pelicans to stay together long term, but it doesn't sound like they've really found it. And there's a quote on this article from Bleacher Report. There is a financial reality to this, Pelicans Executive Vice President of Basketball David Griffin said, and where I think we can go in terms of keeping this group together might not be as far as he and his agency would like us to be able to go. So for now, we're going to play it out. Ingram views himself as a max contract player, and the Pelicans do not. So, almost had to sneeze there for a second, excuse me. So the burden falls on, at least according to the article, on Ingram to change the perception and convince someone on New Orleans or anyone else that he is that type of star caliber player. And that is what he has to prove. And really, it's going to be a difficult task for him to prove that because, again, given his repertoire, he's going to have to score a lot of points. That might be a little bit difficult given how CJ and DeJounte are also very competent scorers, and sharing the ball with him is going to hinder the scoring by quite considerably. But we'll see how the season goes. Next player on this list is one and only Julius Randle for the New York Knicks, easily the player with the most to prove. And the Knicks, they had great moments in last season with the team that they had. They've only gotten better, and because they've only gotten better, it means that they are getting closer and closer to the second apron. Jalen Brunson did take a pay cut to allow the Knicks to maintain a majority of their roster, but going into the future, Julius Randle is going to want to get a contract as well. So it's going to be very curious to see how much money he wants to make and how much he's going to ask from New York. Now, New York wasn't necessarily better without him. The Knicks had a better winning percentage with him than they did without him. They won 63% of their games with him compared to 58% of their games without him. But the optics often seem a little bit superior. The offense appeared to have a better flow without him, then the defense was a lot more versatile without him. Having said that, the lack of a second creator next to Jalen Brunson proved to be the problem for the Knicks in the postseason. And another problem for Julius Randle, and one of the things that I feel like he does have to prove, is that he can be a reliable force in the postseason, because he tends to underperform in moments where he should perform. For example, when the Knicks first made the playoffs with Randle a couple years ago and they lost to Trae Young, Julius Randle didn't play well at all. When Jalen Brunson came onto the team and they played the Miami Heat in the second round of the playoffs, Jalen Brunson was mainly doing most of the work, but Julius Randle was nowhere to be seen. And that's a really common problem for Julius Randle in the postseason, just nowhere to be seen. Not to mention this postseason where he was literally nowhere to be seen. And he needs to prove that he can be that reliable and competent playoff performer for the Knicks in order for the Knicks to finally make that next step and make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and hopefully beat the Boston Celtics. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that he needs to prove, that he can be a postseason performer. And it's going to be tough. It is going to be tough to prove that, but he's got to do that. And the next player on this list is for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that is going to be Chet Holmgren. Now, by any measures, Chet's rookie run was a success. And it also was perhaps not quite what OKC needs if they're going to make a championship push. Like, it wasn't enough. But given that he's a rookie and this was his first season, I say he played very well. Now, Holmgren was he was a helpful rim protector and a great support scorer. Having said that, he did get pushed around on the glass and didn't really show much shot creation and really tailed off as a three-point shooter. He went from hitting 39% of his threes before All-Star break to just making 32% after. And his connection rate fell further to 26% in the postseason. So it's like, again, like a lot of the problems with OKC, in my opinion, was a lot of inexperience in the postseason. And most of their young players, the only one that really played fantastic was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Most of their young players didn't really perform when they desperately needed them to against an experienced team in the postseason like the Dallas Mavericks. And the offseason addition of Isaiah Hartenstein lessens some concerns with Holmgren's rebounding, but there are still questions about whether or not SGA has enough scoring support. And Chet Holmgren needs to be that scorer, that same efficient scorer that everybody was gassing up in the beginning of the season. Because before Victor won the MVP unanimously, there was a little bit of a debate between who would win it between Chet and Victor. And a lot of people were favoring Chet because of team record and his efficiency. All of those people that favored Chet ended up being wrong because that's not how the Rookie of the Year award works. It's that simple. That's how MVP works, but that's not how Rookie of the Year award works. Because yes, he might have been part of a team that had the best record, but you have to remember that his starting point guard was an MVP caliber player. He had help. It wasn't him doing that. And the efficiency, you could argue that the reason why he was so efficient was because he had a great point guard. And because of having a great team, it elevated his game. It's really simple. I'm very surprised that Chet was even considered in Rookie of the Year conversations. But that's just me, in my opinion. Let me know in the comments exactly what you guys think. So we're going to continue on with this segment into the fifth segment, but I have to go into a break for the ads, so I apologize for that. So stay tuned if you guys are interested in how the list is going to continue unfolding. I will be right back. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, we are going to be continuing the conversation of players who have the most to prove. We left off at, I believe it was Chet Holmgren for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So now we're moving on to the Orlando Magic, where the player who I feel has the most to prove is Jalen Suggs. And easily, he was a top 5 pick in the draft, and he transformed himself from a liability on offense to a reliability on offense. And he's proven to be a very important asset for the Orlando Magic. Not to mention his performance in the postseason. While it wasn't that great, he did bring a certain level of value to the team. And after shattering his previous personal best percentages from the field, shooting 47% from the field and 39% from three, which is fantastic. He is no longer messed up the team's spacing, and he's sort of starting to develop into, you could argue that he could be the second option for the team if he develops and continues to develop as rapidly as he does. So can he add more volume to his shots, though? Because that was really a thing. He didn't really take that many shots, despite the fact that he's averaging such good field goal percentage and such a good three-point percentage as a guard. And, you know, that's really going to be the big question coming in for Jalen Suggs, if he can sort of up that production in the regular season and it could translate into the postseason. Now, this wasn't his, obviously, you know, he was drafted in 2021. He wasn't drafted in 2024. So he's slowly but surely built into that, you know, sort of player that he needs to be for the Orlando Magic. Not to mention his defense has somewhat improved as well. So it's not like he's a complete liability now on the floor, which is exactly what they need. Like, I mean, in his rookie campaign, he shot 21% from three. Now he completely changed that to 39% from three. In the postseason, he averaged 14 points. But again, his three-point percentage was a little bit inconsistent, shooting just below 30%. And he really needs to sort of prove that into the postseason and going into this year, because I was really close to putting Franz Wagner on this list, given, you know, the big contract that he had. But considering how he played in the Olympics and just how fantastic he was for his team, I decided not to put him on the list, because I think those performances in the Olympics are going to translate over to the NBA, and he's going to be just as consistent and just as valuable for his team as he was on the Olympics. So I think that it should be Jalen Suggs who has the most to prove. And excuse me. But the Magic, they're going to try to make a jump for a little bit of a deeper postseason run. I don't think that's going to happen given the teams that are already in the Eastern Conference and just how good and how top-heavy it is. But we'll see. This is why we play the game. Anything can happen. Now, next player on this list, we're on the Philadelphia 76ers. And, of course, it's going to be this guy right here, Joel Embiid. You could make an argument that it should be Paul George, but I think Joel Embiid has way more to prove than Paul George. And the big reason why is because of his postseason performances. Again, he is a phenomenal player in the regular season. It is just the postseason is a problem for Joel Embiid. It is a major problem. They have never, ever made it to past the second round with Joel Embiid as their starting center and the centerpiece of their offense. They've never been able to do that. And you can make the argument that it's because Joel Embiid's teammates just haven't been that great. You can make the argument that Joel Embiid just isn't healthy in the postseason. There's so many nuances that come to his playoff plunders. And again, like, he needs to prove that now that he has a good team, now that he has a fantastic player in Paul George, now that he has another great option with Tyrese Maxey and a solid team around him, he has to prove that he can finally make it past the second round and make it to the Eastern Conference Finals with the team that he has. There should be no excuses going into this season now. He needs to be there for his team in the postseason. He needs to be there for his team in the regular season, and they have to perform in the postseason. The same thing could be said about Paul George. Paul George has to perform in the postseason. They all do. And this is probably going to be a legacy season for a lot of these people because, again, Joel Embiid, he came off of an MVP a year ago, not last season, but the season before that. And when he came off the MVP, he didn't make it past the second round. He's the only MVP in the history of MVPs that has never made it past the second round of the NBA postseason. He needs this. He needs to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. If he doesn't, this is going to be a failure. It's that simple. He needs to be available for his team. I know he gets injured, but that's part of the game, and you have to be able to stay healthy enough for the postseason. Like, I know that a lot of people are going to feel rather mixed on that because it's like, a lot of these players can't really help injuries. Joel Embiid doesn't really do anything to help himself from not getting hurt, though, because, like, he always falls on the floor every single time he goes up for a layup or anything that's inside the paint. Like, of course he's going to get injured with how he's trying to land. But I digress with all of that. He needs to prove that he can make it past the second round because so far it's been the same thing every single year just with different players. And again, you can make the argument that it's because James Harden and Ben Simmons, they underperformed when they really needed them to perform. But again, you can also make the argument that it's because Joel Embiid wasn't healthy for a majority of the postseason, and he's never been healthy for any postseason that he's played in, aside from the one first-round exit where he got swept in the bubble against the Boston Celtics. Go figure. And he needs to prove. He has to prove that he can be the best player, and he can be a winning player on an NBA team. He has to. It is an absolute must. With the team that he has, there is zero excuses. None. And, let me see. Do I have time for one more segment? Do I have time for one more player? You know what? We'll do one more. So, next player is for the Phoenix Suns. Yes, Tyus Jones is on the Phoenix Suns right now. He had a very good year with, or not a really good year, but he had a decent year with the Washington Wizards. He was a pretty pleasant surprise for the team. And like again, in a lot of ways, Jones is already out, and he's generally promising as well. He was able to average 7.3 assists along with 1 turnover in the season. That 7-to-1 turnover ratio is pretty good. And he was also a pretty competent shooter, shooting 48% from the field, 41% from 3, and 80% from the free throw line. And really, the jury is still out, though, on exactly whether or not he can serve as a competent starter for a contending team. Because, like, when you're playing really good on a bad team, it's not really seen as the same as you playing good on a winning team. Because if you're playing good on a winning team, it's because the numbers that you're putting up usually have some sort of value. But the numbers that you put up on a losing team, you can argue that they're garbage time numbers and they're not really that important. So that's why the jury is still out on him. And this is obviously going to be this could be a cash strap. There's going to be cash strap with the Suns. Were able to lure him in with the veterans minimum. Granted, there weren't a ton of point guards in the opening or any teams with cap space this offseason, and Jones is waiting so long to sign for, so little suggests his market never really materialized. If he can tie things together on this talented, top-heavy team in Phoenix, according to this article, he could have much more lucrative offers available to him next summer, aside from being, on the veteran minimum. So this is sort of why he has a lot to prove. He has to prove that he can be a player that deserves a contract with an NBA team, a big contract with an NBA team, aside from playing like this. That's really the argument and where he has a lot to prove. And we have 5 more teams left, so I'll save those players and those teams for another day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. That's the end of the 5th segment. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, we're all ears. If you really want your comment or question to get noticed, go ahead and use Super Chat. The link is, you just click the $sign below the chat box, and then you can go ahead and, what in the world? ESPN just dropped an NBA expansion mock draft. Okay, that's a little bit new, but anyways, aside from that, if Super Chat isn't really your thing, then you can go ahead and use the link displayed below the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net, and then you can send in your comments or donations that way. Either or really helps the show. Doesn't matter which one you do. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that